Hello, everyone. So today I am here. I have the honor of being joined by Captain Kozuch. And not only is she an incredible woman in the Army, but she is also one of my commanders at the Cornell ROTC program. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining me. And
you're welcome.
Why don't we just start off with how long have you been in the Army, and can you explain a little bit of what your job in the Army is?
So I have been in the Army for 9 years now. I commissioned out of West Point in 2011, and I am a field artillery officer. So being a field artillery officer, we have to have 3 hats mainly. You're the eyes, where you're actually finding the targets, and then you're the brain, where you're actually computing how to get rounds from the cannons, missiles, rockets from one place to the target, or you're the brawn, what we call the cannons, the actual rounds going down range.
Cool. So that sounds like a pretty awesome job to have in the Army.
What's great about field artillery is that it always stays interesting. You never really stay in one job for longer than a year at a time. So as soon as you get really good at one job, you're moving on to the next. So we are definitely more of generalists than specialists, but it's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. Sounds like a fun moving around. So what has been your favorite part about being in the Army so far?
It's always the people. I mean, we have, even in the ROTC program, we have some long weeks, we have some long weekends sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's being around you guys as the cadets, it's being around the other cadre that, really bring the purpose to the job into place. And it's been the same thing at every organization that I've ever been to. I was in Hawaii, and it was super busy all of the time, but I worked with some of the best people that I've ever, worked with in my entire life, who just made it feel like it wasn't work at all.
That's so cool. I know that even in my short experience in the Army so far, the people have definitely been my favorite part. I've met so many awesome people. So definitely agree with you on that one.
And it makes sense. I mean, we're a people-oriented service. We do have some equipment that comes into play every once in a while, but at the end of the day, we have to be moving and inspiring people, and so that's what draws us to the Army in the first place, I think.
For sure. So what would you say have been some of the biggest struggles that you faced, or obstacles that you've had to overcome while you've been in the Army?
So the most obvious one is that I'm a female, and not only is the Army overall male dominated, but this is also a male dominated field or branch that I'm in currently. So when I commissioned as a second lieutenant, I could only go to 5 different duty stations being a female as a field artillery officer. And it was just crazy that I couldn't have the same experiences that, my classmates, we all went to Bullock together, and then, you would think, hey, we could just go anywhere together. We all received the same training initially, so why can't I do the same job? So that was frustrating at the beginning. And I ended up being the very first female platoon leader in my entire battalion's history. And I remember I kept getting speeches from, first it was the battalion commander, then it was my battery commander, and then it was my platoon sergeant, who said, hey, we've briefed the guys on how they're supposed to talk to you and act around you, as our new platoon leader. And finally, I went back to my battery commander and I said, I just want to be treated like a platoon leader. I don't care if it's male or female. Just treat me how you treated the rest of your platoon leaders and we'll be fine. And that's exactly what happened. It didn't let it bog me down or anything. And I just went out there and proved myself, and I've been able to do that ever since. Kind of back to the same thing with BOLIC. It was a little bit frustrating that once I got to captain's career course, also at Fort Sill, you know, the guys, for the most part in my class, you know, it was so easy for them because all of the things that you were being tested on in captain's career course were the same things that they had been doing in their day-to-day job. Because what I also didn't say was I had to be assigned to a rocket and missile unit as opposed to cannon artillery. And what we learned in the school is all cannon stuff. So it was the first time since BOLIC that I had to go back to this. So that was, you know, it's not fair maybe sometimes, but, you know, once again, I just had to go out and had to work a little bit harder, study a little bit longer, and find people to help me out along the way.
Well, that definitely sounds like definitely a struggle to come over, but it sounds like that you've definitely paved through that obstacle really well, and your story is great and definitely inspiring. So
if you haven't listened to Lean In from Sheryl Sandberg, she talks about how, you know, the corporate ladder is a ladder. You know, you have to do step 1 to get to step 2 to step 3. But she describes what women have to go through as a jungle gym. And I definitely see that with the experience that I've had in the Army. You know, it hasn't been step 1 to step 2. It's been step 1 to here, over here, all over the place. But ultimately, you know, I'm still headed in the same direction at the end of the day.
That's definitely a cool analogy and interesting way to look at it. So I guess this is a good transition then into my next question of what has been one of the most important lessons that you've learned from your time in service?
So something I didn't even pick up until recently is that you are the best manager of your career. And that also goes back to receiving feedback and, you know, how to improve yourself along the way. I always used to think, oh, it is my superior leader's responsibility to pull me in and tell me what I'm doing right or wrong and tell me what to do to make it better. But it really has to be a two-way conversation. You know, if they aren't providing you the feedback, you need to go back and take the initiative and seek feedback from them. And if they tell you what you're doing wrong, but they don't tell you how to improve it, you need to keep pushing them to figure out what is it, because how are you going to ever get any better if even they can't explain? Not to do it in like an insubordination type of way, but you know, that is our responsibility as leaders, is not only provide the feedback, but how to improve yourself from there.
For sure. That sounds like it's an important lesson in both the military world and the civilian world that could work in like corporate situations, so even school or anything like that. So definitely a good lesson, a good takeaway.
Definitely. Always be proactive. Just don't wait for things to come your way.
So then I just want to leave off with, are there any words of wisdom for the younger generation, maybe people who are thinking about joining the military or specifically the Army, or maybe for people who are just starting out?
So my biggest thing is you don't have to have it all figured out right here, right now. I've taken my military career sometimes one day at a time, sometimes a week at a time, sometimes a year at a time. And I would have never imagined that I was going to be here I had no idea how long I was going to be in the Army, but here I am. And that kind of goes for branching, I guess, is kind of where I want to put it back to, is I wouldn't commit to more time or commit to a duty station or anything, because you never know exactly what you're going to be tied down to. So that was one of the best things that I did coming out of West Point, is I didn't sign up for extra time to get the branch that I wanted. I didn't sign up for extra time for the location that I wanted, because you really don't know what you're getting into. and I would pursue what makes you passionate, because it just goes back to, you know, if you like what you do, it's not going to feel like work. So, and I have a psychology degree. Does that have to relate anything directly to being a field artillery officer? Absolutely not, other than, you know, we're in a people industry, so I want to be able to help people and understand people. But as I have continued in my career and I had the opportunity to go to grad school, as I'm in this military science instructor role, I'm pursuing sports psychology. It has, you know, very small applications into the Army, but it's what I'm passionate about. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing those words of wisdom. And thank you again so much for taking this time out of your day to interview with us. I hope that everybody watching, I really hope that you enjoyed this interview. I hope that you got something out of Captain Kozuch's stories. Thank you once again for joining me today, ma'am.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Have a good one. Bye.